Sorites Paradox isn't a heap. Two grains aren't either. But what if you keep adding grains one at a time? At what exact point does the pile of sand become a heap? This question lies at the heart of the Sorites Paradox, a fascinating thought experiment that reveals how seemingly simple ideas can unravel into profound complexity. At first glance, the paradox seems easy to dismiss. After all, you might say a heap is just a general term, it doesn't need to be precise. But the moment you start asking where the line is drawn, things get tricky. If one grain doesn't make a heap, and adding one more grain doesn't suddenly transform it into a heap, does that mean no amount of grains can ever form a heap? This slippery slope of reasoning challenges not just how we define heaps of sand but how we deal with vague concepts in general. The Sorites Paradox takes its name from the Greek word soros, meaning heap, and has puzzled philosophers for centuries. It isn't just about sand, it's about how we define anything that lacks clear boundaries. Think about baldness. At what point does a person with thinning hair become bald? Or consider wealth. How many dollars do you need to go from being poor to rich? These questions seem trivial at first but reveal a deeper truth about the limits of language and reasoning. The paradox exposes a fundamental problem with vague concepts. They resist precise definitions. Words like heap, bald, or rich are useful because they allow us to talk about general ideas without needing exact measurements. But when pushed to their limits, these concepts become ambiguous. The Sorites Paradox forces us to confront this ambiguity and question how we can make sense of a world filled with fuzzy boundaries. One possible answer to the Sorites Paradox is by introducing the idea of degrees or gradual change. Instead of thinking in absolutes, heap or not a heap, we could think in terms of probabilities or thresholds. For instance, we might say that as the number of grains increases, the likelihood of the pile being considered a heap gradually rises. This approach avoids drawing a hard line but raises another question. How do we decide where to place these thresholds? Even with degrees, the problem of vagueness remains. Another proposed solution is to embrace the idea of context. In some contexts, a pile of 50 grains might be called a heap, while in others it might not. For example, if you're talking about grains of sand on a beach, a small pile might not qualify as a heap. But if you're looking at grains on a table, even a tiny pile might seem like a heap by comparison. This context-dependent view acknowledges that definitions are flexible, shaped by the situations in which they're used. The Sorites Paradox doesn't just challenge how we think about words. It has real-world implications. Take laws, for example. Many legal systems rely on vague concepts like reasonable doubt or excessive force. These terms are intentionally left flexible to accommodate different situations, but they also create room for interpretation and disagreement. The paradox reminds us that while vagueness can be useful, it can also lead to uncertainty and conflict. Similarly, the Sorites Paradox applies to social and ethical questions. Consider climate change. At what point does a gradual increase in temperature become a crisis? Or think about social issues like inequality. How much disparity is too much? These are not just abstract questions. They influence how we respond to some of the most pressing challenges of our time. The Sorites Paradox forces us to confront the fact that many of these problems don't have clear-cut solutions. But perhaps the most profound lesson of the Sorites Paradox is what it reveals about our need for clarity in a messy, ambiguous world. We like to think in categories, dividing things into neat boxes. This is a heap, this isn't. This is bald, this isn't. But the world rarely conforms to such clear distinctions. The Sorites Paradox challenges us to embrace complexity and uncertainty, recognizing that many of the concepts we use are imprecise by nature. In the end, the Sorites Paradox isn't just about grains of sand or fuzzy definitions. It's a reminder of how we navigate the gray areas of life. It teaches us that ambiguity is not a flaw in our thinking but a reflection of the world's complexity. And perhaps that's what makes this paradox so life-changing. It shows us that the search for clarity often leads not to answers, but to deeper questions, pushing us to think critically about the words we use, the decisions we make, and the way we understand the world.